Welcome to another episode of Fired Up for Friday, the podcast letting you know what has me fired up for this Friday, April 24th, 2026. Make sure you stick around because we also have the album of last week, which is the best album from last week. And it was a surprise. I didn't even have it on my radar. And quite honestly, I've never heard of the band before, but I'm going to be hearing a lot more of them soon. So stick around, you'll want to see who that is. And I'd like to thank the bands, the labels, and PR for sending all this heat and heavy over for me to check out that I can share with you. Without them, I'd have nothing to share. So make sure you like, follow, subscribe so you don't miss the new heavy that's dropping every Friday. So let's dig in and see what has me fired up for this Friday. Scottish mystical metalheads in Cnoc and Tursa have been marinating one hauntingly delicate and equally as powerful album in their latest conjuring, A Cry for the Slain. A concept album of sorts telling tales of Scottish folklore backed by blackened metal that at times can be melodic and heavy and other times be just as eerie and just as sinister, especially with the dark mythological and occult stories. And it's on the perfect label to tell these tales. Apocalyptic witchcraft, that is. And what kind of tales do you expect from apocalyptic witchcraft? Mary Poppins? Hell no! This entire album was painstakingly crafted, and it took a whole 8 years to create. And with a solid production, it helped give this album a bit of light in such a dark and sinister brooding album. And Cnoc and Tursa's A Cry for the Slain is for fans of Primordial, Enslave, Winterfelth, and maybe even some Agalloch, as Cnoc and Tursa does an excellent job of bits and pieces of some folk elements all throughout their sound, helping tie this whole album together, while providing a plethora of textures for the listener's ears to paint with. And whether you're looking for something a bit blackened, this works. Or something maybe a bit muted and drawn back, this again works. Maybe a little bit melodic and a bit of lighter moments, again this works. A Cry for the Slain is diverse as hell, but it's balanced just as equal. And having interviewed several bands that incorporate these traditional folklores, mythological elements, and bits of their culture, whether it's in the form of the recently released monster of an album by Scottish band Hellripper. And now that I think about it, these storylines in A Cry for the Slain are very similar storylines to Hellripper, however a completely different sound, a little bit slower than the speed of Thrash. Or the interview I did with Ireland's Dara O'Connor, link to that here, from the Irish band Horrenda, that give you some Irish demons and folklore to work with, which is very similar in the storytelling department. So when you're done with this Fired Up for Friday, head over, check out both of those reviews, and maybe you'll find some more stuff you like. Especially if you're like me, and you love those Irish and Scottish demons. I'm married one. Links to both of those interviews will be in the description, so head on over and check them out there. Look at this album art, just look at it. It looks like it sounds vengeful, gutting, sincere. And as much as I like this album art, I like the album just as much. I'm giving this one an 80. And while we're talking about darkness, despair, and cavernous emptiness, a great album to transition to immediately would be Nixil Drouth's split EP, Toward Dead Temples. And with my body being the temple I worship, and looking like this, I've been dead for years. Nixil kicks it off with 3 songs of straight black metal, in which I would describe as more Dark Throne or Emperor-esque. But I'm not an expert on like the first wave, the third wave, Norwegian black. I'm not an expert in black metal, I prefer thrash. But honestly, I don't give a shit what wave this black metal is. I love them all, bring it on! And to be fair, Nixil is way more representative of black metal than Drouth is on this split, as Nixil uses tempo changes and the riffage to craft cavernous black metal, where at times the brief periods of tempo changes paints a canvas the darkest shade of black for me to stare into, and It's almost as black as my soul. This album's laid out solidly, as Nixil's 3 songs feel very cold and isolating. Whatever Portland, Oregon's Nixil built on their first half of the split, it's the Baltimore Blackened Rollers and Drouth that are here to destroy it all. And who isn't up for a bit of destruction? I know I'm in. Like, what did you expect? They're from Baltimore. And Drouth is some ripping black and roll in the vein of Grave Ripper. Link to that interview here. Or another band with a badass release this year, The Ruins of Beverest. In between the bands The Ruins of Beverest and Grave Ripper, they complement each other well, but are vastly different in black metal, which makes this a widely diverse album, albeit horrible shades of black. And Drouth does an excellent job of tempo and riff changes, keeping these songs fresh. And while the tempos are so fast that Drouth doesn't stay in any of these riffs for too long, making me have to smash that play button repeatedly, as this was an easy EP to listen to. And I've probably listened to this album about 8 to 10 times this last week, with each one saying, this is the last time I have to move on. And here I am. I'm probably going to listen to it again tonight after I stop recording this. And Drouth comes with an illusion of melody, but as the album closer, The Outer Church plays, listeners get that sense that that outer church is engulfed in a raging inferno, cool enough to lure you in to strike the match. And as hot and heavy as this ripper is, if this is what hell feels like, save me a spot. And as this album's so blackened, I never liked the Keller White. It stains so easily. And Drouth has this little riff at the 3-minute mark of the 4th song, Cathartes Aura, that I could have just listened to for a whole straight hour. You could have put that like 4-second riff on an album for an hour and I'm sold. Tones were perfection, and both bands, whether it was Nixil or Drouth, complement each other quite well. And I've never been to Portland, but they say it's as dark as Pittsburgh. Is it just as heavy? And I gave up. I'm giving this one an 84. Like I said, maybe if I had 15 to 30 more spins, it might have been an 85 or an 86. This thing rips. My only complaint was it's only 5 songs. I want 50 of this. Milwaukee has one of the heaviest death metal festivals in all of America, and that's because it's a heavy city. How heavy, you might ask? Milwaukee's heavy enough that it formed a bunch of craters called Great Lakes. And one of the bands helping cause all that devastation is Milwaukee's best ice. I couldn't resist. Pig's Blood. And to be fair, Pig's Blood has to be on ice. If you don't put blood or a heart on ice, it's just gonna rot. So would this be Milwaukee's best ice? So why not have a beer, Milwaukee's best ice, while listening to Milwaukee's best metal and Pig's Blood's newest album, Destroying the Spirit, off Dark Descent Records, another appropriately named label for the record. Because once you hit play on Pig's Blood's newest album, you're gonna start descending into the darkness at least 6 feet. And Pig's Blood's Destroying the Spirit is a great follow-up to the split of Nixil and Drouth, as Pig's Blood is racing blackened death metal. At times with some thrash influences, and at other times having some extreme metal influences. But all the time, heavy as hell influences, and I'll take it. These hopeless romantics deliver an album of 10 tracks, not for the squeamish by any stretch of the imagination. And Pig's Blood seems to lean into anti-religious themes more than the ultra-violence you would think when you hear Pig's Blood. This is for fans of bands like Incantation, Morbid Angel, Gore Guts, or even that new Immolation album, Descent, that everyone's talking about. If you like that, you're gonna love Pig's Blood. This album is relentless, where the only thing that changes is at what tempo the blood is spritzing from your speakers. As these veterans know how to change tempos and grooves on a dime seamlessly. And while the drums are driving this album forward, it sounds like the guitars are being strummed with cheese graters. And what the hell could be more metal than cheese grating riffs? And at times this album is so damn tight that I think if it didn't, it might have fallen apart. The vocals are unhinged, and this is no holds barred death metal. having that old school feel with the benefits of updated production and modern sound. And while Pig's Blood decided to call this album Destroying the Spirit, they should have called it Destroying My Neck, as Pig's Blood bleeds out at an 82. Pig's Blood's killing it! The hardest part for me when making these videos is telling you what bands sound like. I always try to fit them inside like a little genre or compare them to another album, so you guys get an idea of what they sound like. But when something is so imbalanced and it's made up of so many different pieces and sounds, how do you classify that? In the latest doom sludge core punk release from Pittsburgh's Stalemate of Wills, this trio of heavy takes this mixture of genres, pulls pieces and mixtures of each to make up one quality sound. In their latest album, Existence Denied, and I keep forgetting that Existence Denied is a debut full-length, which sounds like Stalemate of Wills had several albums released prior, because this album is tight and it's great. We're a bit different here when it comes to your metal, and Existence Denied is no different. It was gonna fight through until it survived. Something this good can't be denied or shelved. 8 tracks of no filler sludge, and just like Pittsburgh, it has these dark and doom clouds floating over the whole piece, with a hardcore independent DIY ethos fueling the fires of Stalemate of Wills. And Stalemate of Wills did it all to this album. They wrote, played, performed, mixed, mastered, executed. They did all of that themselves. Like I said, that DIY hardcore punk ethos, giving Stalemate of Wills complete creative control, which is what separates this band apart from the rest in their genre, or the genre I just made up. Without pressures from labels, management, etc., Stalemate of Wills can craft their own direction of sound, dancing, or maybe two-stepping in and out of several different genres. And when I say hardcore, I mean hardcore punk. This has that metalcore sludge feel, but when I say metalcore, I mean straight metalcore. Metal and hardcore vocals. Not that whiny, watered down metalcore that people are putting out today. In and out of several different genres of metal, like doom, sludge, and hardcore arenas, but never really committing fully to one, and never compromising either. If you're a big fan of that doom and sludge sound, or you're a big fan of that punk and hardcore sound, you're gonna love this album. If you just like good music, you're gonna like this album too. And the whole thing I'm just trying to get at with this album is, don't skip it. Make sure you hit this one on your Friday listens. It's a debut and it kicks ass. How much ass? An 84's ass. Here's another band with a killer debut, and this album is just as phenomenal. Coming in hot off of Ardua Records, Belgium's Witch Piss released their debut full-length, The Devil Doesn't Burn. And as hot as this album is, I wouldn't be so sure of that. But I bet you, when I spend eternity in hell, I'll find out. 8 songs of groove rock and gritty toned mayhem, all contained and wrapped up with some sincere vocals that honestly sound a bit dangerous. And Witch Piss uses some samples to help navigate the listener throughout the album into the occult, the dark, the sinister. And just like most people from my era, I can't resist temptation, especially when it's metal. Heavy blues tones, but with huge, major desert rock influences. And as someone who is of the belief that there's only 2 types of people in this world, you either got sheeps or you got wolves, it's the 3rd track that grabbed my attention, Wolf Cries Boy, which was one of my favorite childhood stories since I was a little midget metalhead, with the sample reinforcing the fact we're all gonna die. And it sounds like Witch Piss is killing it. As soon as that double bass work kicks in to an already rockin' groove with a bit of get up and go. And while Witch Piss is killing it with that double bass, it was right about that time that Witch Piss reminded me, it's time to live! For fans of that heavy distorted blues influenced fuzzy fiends in bands like High on Fire, Alabama Thunder Pussy, Orange Goblin, and maybe even Red Fang. And The Devil Doesn't Burn is not only a great album, It's a great time. Oh yeah, and a little bit of a reminder, this thing's a debut, remember? And Witch Piss is taking the golden trophy. What'd you think I was gonna say? I'm gonna go wash this filth off of me with a shower. Excellent debut, Witch Piss. I'm giving this one an 88. And now, for the album of last week. And while I enjoyed this album a ton, the handful of run-throughs that I gave it wasn't enough for me to grasp it entirely. This heavily textured, brand new album from Crippled Black Phoenix feels like an ebb and flow of tension and anxiousness. On their newest full length, which I will attempt to pronounce correctly, Sceaduhelm. Sorry, it'd be cool if you guys could leave the pronunciation in the comments. On this album, whether it's a darker ballad, a passive feeling noise track, an atmospheric lifting piece, or a darker introspective song about, about loss and finality, you'll find it here. In a get what you pay for album that clocks in at over an hour. Crippled Black Phoenix does an amazing job of weaving aural tapestries together in what turns out to be one checkered and multicolored pattern. Using samples and effects to provide more texture and emotion, some of these throwback sounds give me a more of a nostalgic feel before Crippled Black Phoenix snuffs that hope out with their weighty rhythms. Truly amazing album that every time I press play, I found another sound in this album that would just hook my ear and make me just press play again. With only 4 or 5 listens under my belt, I feel like I barely scratched the surface on this album. But the more I scratched, the more I loved. This Crippled Black Phoenix album, Sceaduhelm, I butchered that, is simply an amazing album, even if I can't pronounce it correctly. And I hope you guys love it and this entire release schedule as much as I did. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What did I miss? What are you looking forward to this Friday? Let me know in the comments what you're looking forward to coming up this Friday. And most importantly, thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out with me another episode. Until next time, keep it thrashy.